All right. Welcome, everybody. So I'm Jeff Megivern. My pronouns are he, him. And I'm here to talk about video games, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Video games and space exploration. Yeah. So since the dawn of video games and the dawn of the space age happened around the same time, through the decades, there's a lot of cross-section between the two. They meet in different places. They meet technologically, where space tech is in how we game, gaming tech is in how we explore space. And of course, thematically, there's space themes all throughout video games and how do we control the Canadarm other than with a joystick. So the pictures on the tile slide here on the audience left. On the left side is the Pac-Man Nebula. This was, when it was initially discovered, you know, the loose definition of discovery. Someone saw it for the first time and told other people who hadn't seen it yet, called that discovery. So the Pac-Man Nebula wasn't called the Pac-Man Nebula in the 1700s when it was first seen, or whenever that was. But in the 1980s, it was renamed the Pac-Man Nebula, and the picture here from the Spitzer Space Telescope doesn't quite show the Pac-manliness. So the white cloud on the right side of that picture is only seen in not visible light. So if you only look at the Pac-Man Nebula in visible light, you can kind of see the shape of a Pac-Man there. And if you're imaginarily uninclined there, that's Pac-Man, okay? So Pac-Man Nebula, Pac-Man. Pac-Man Nebula, Pac-Man, yeah. And see, he does that, yeah. All right, so why am I talking to you about these things? Oh, yeah, sorry, I don't mean to skip. On the right side of the page, of course, is Space Invaders, one of the earliest strictly space-themed, of course, alien attacking space-themed video game. So I was an intern at NASA Kennedy. I worked launch operations through that time. These are some pictures of launches that launched while I was there. That's a picture of me on the left at Vandenberg Air Force Base about 20 years ago. That was, I believe, the Aura launch. It was a Earth-observing satellite on a Delta II. The launch vehicle in the middle is a Delta IV Heavy. That's the first launch of a Delta IV Heavy. The bottom half of the launch vehicle is all burnt up because that's how we launched that thing. And then the picture on the right side of that screen is a Delta II in a heavy configuration. So that's has 9 solid rocket boosters launching the Opportunity Mars Exploration Rover. So that was part of the Spirit and Opportunity launches in 2003. So there's some launch vehicles. For about 10 years, I worked at a company called Rocketdyne developing rocket engines. So I am a rocket scientist in profession as well as tag. So I'm currently at NASA Caltech Jet Propulsion Laboratory down in Pasadena, California. Thanks. Thank you, yeah. Thanks, yeah, so I lead a team of materials engineers doing materials development work, so we develop new materials for space applications and establish the performance of existing materials in new environments like Venus and Europa. The pictures on the slide here are a variety of rocket engine tests that I worked while I was at Rocketdyne. J2X, I think the big test stand in the middle is a space shuttle main engine test, and then an injector test there in the middle. So rocket engines. So when I transitioned to JPL, I started working on this mission, Mars 2020 Perseverance rover. Thank you, yeah, we're on Mars. We've been on Mars for about 3 years now. We are collecting samples. We have around 40 sample tubes on the rover. We've collected a little over a dozen samples already. We have a little over a dozen sampled twice, so we've collected 20-some samples. We've dropped 12 of them on the surface. In case the rover breaks down for some reason, we have already deployed samples to the surface, and we're carrying around the remaining samples and continuing to collect the last dozen or so over the next year or two. So the main objectives for the Perseverance rover are primarily geology. So we're trying to understand better what Mars is made of. The Mars Curiosity rover captured samples a couple centimeters into the surface. We're collecting samples about the size of a magic marker of rock. So we're be able to understand geology. Because we're bringing those samples back, that sample caching is a major objective. So eventually, we're going to drop the remaining samples onto the surface, and we have a follow-on mission called Mars Sample Return that's going to collect those samples and bring them back to Earth. The astrobiology is part of that sample collection, so we have a series of instruments that are looking for potentials for past signs of life. And then preparation for humans. So there's a push in the global space program, as there has been for a long time, to send humans to Mars. So we had some experiments on Perseverance, in particular one called MOXIE that used electrolysis to turn the atmosphere of Mars into oxygen. Something that's interesting about MOXIE is it takes so much power to do that operation. It generates a couple grams of oxygen from the atmosphere. We can't do anything else. So we have to do a MOXIE test. It's interesting, while we're doing a MOXIE test, the rover literally has no MOXIE. The gifts on the slide there are different sample caching operations. When I was on Mars 2020, I was responsible for some of the development of the sample caching system, which is the big robotic arm on the front, the coring drill. There's a little robotic arm underneath the rover, and all of the sample caching, drilling, sample tube collection, all that kind of stuff. There's the team, July 2019, before the pandemic, so there's no masks in there. And we were at our largest, we were about 600 or 700 people. I'm right there. So, okay, so there's some credentials. Believe me, I'm saying things, I mean them. I love the space program, I love space exploration. Oh no. So some spacious games I've enjoyed. I wanted to talk a little bit about just this overview of games, and then I'm going to dive into the meat of the talk. So Space Invaders, 1978, gave us some initial flavors of what it might mean to interact with aliens. Of course, we didn't interact with them in a positive way. And of course, if you want, go ahead and cheer if you've played any of these games as I'm flipping through them. So, Astro, yeah, Space Invaders, yeah. Then Simpsons, Bart versus the Space Mutants. Again, a militaristic approach to alien interaction, although Bart seems to side with the aliens in some ways here. There was Masters of Orion and, of course, Earthbound. Solid games about a little bit of space politics, some space adventuring. And in the mid to late 90s, it was, of course, the heyday of joysticks and X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. So I'll talk a little bit about that joystick tech, because some of the approaches to how we handle force feedback in joysticks was originally developed for the Space Shuttle program. And, of course, Star Fox. Yep. Flight training, good luck. StarCraft and Star Wars Rebellion. So, Star Wars, and I think those are the two that I have on this list. Star Wars, of course, it takes place in space. I don't know if you knew that. If you're unfamiliar with Star Wars, it happened a long time ago, far, far away. And then one program, one application that does a good job at the fundamentals of getting to space, being in space, and using orbital mechanics to get from one place to another, of course, is the Kerbal Space Program. Yeah. So on the, he said he's killed a lot of Kerbals. In my first Kerbal orbiting experience, I sent up the brave Kerbal Valentina Kerman. She's still in orbit. So thank you for your sacrifice. It's important to give your spacecraft enough propellant to do a deorbit burn. So as much as it takes to get into orbit, you also have to come back. For the greater good, yeah, that's what we told Valentina before we sent her. Of course, and I don't have a slide for this one, but Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time takes this idea of teamwork and space psychology and how to work together to save bunnies from various monster types. And I don't have a slide for No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky circa 2019. Yeah, thank you. Maybe not No Man's Sky circa 2016, effectively unplayable, but since then they've done great work and all the free content and all that. I mean, I can't say enough about No Man's Sky. And then Among Us. But honestly, Among Us is just space murder. It's yeah, space clue. Thank you. So in 1958, NACA became NASA. One of the first video game played for leisure, because you can imagine to an accountant, business applications might be a game for leisure, but for leisure for the general population. And microchips were all born in the same year. So that video game is called Tennis for Two. It was developed on an oscilloscope at the Brookhaven National Labs. And today, NASA Space Radiation Labs are located at Brookhaven. It's in Maryland, I believe. The design was conceived by a Manhattan Project physicist and the technician he worked with. And those are pictures of the Tennis for Two oscilloscope at a Brookhaven National Lab open house at the end of the 50s. They brought the oscilloscope out and said, people aren't going to like games. They're going to be more entranced by the instruments that we are doing and the experiments that we're showing. Everybody lined up for Tennis for Two. So if you thought the lines were bad at PAX, the first video game? Come on. And if you want to build it yourself, there's the schematic. That's a couple of resistors, some op amps. You can figure it out. So I wanted to frame the next portion of the talk around the Europa Clipper mission. So Europa is a moon of Jupiter. The first several feet of surface of Europa are solid salt ice. And we believe underneath the ice is water. And so we're sending a mission there to orbit Jupiter. And while it's orbiting Jupiter, it's going to perform various flybys of Europa, collecting data about what the surface is made of and the topography. And so the spacecraft is assembled. It's in Florida now. It's at Cape Canaveral, and we're launching in October. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's a particularly tough mission because it has to go such a long distance, and it's exclusively solar powered. So you can imagine as you get further and further away from the sun, solar power is less and less available. So we were power constrained on that spacecraft. So the question was, why not an RTG? So RTG, radioisotope thermoelectric generator, using the heat from nuclear power to generate power with thermal electrics. They're heavy, they're complex, they're expensive. So the mass requirements kind of drove us away from an RTG. But we built it, and we'll see if it works. And when we get there, maybe, I don't know. I've never been. So some of the high-level mission objectives, I mentioned that ice and investigating the composition. That's what the spacecraft looks like. It's quite large, using a variety of different propulsion systems. It's interesting. So using this Clipper mission and its path, I'm going to talk a little bit about each of the stages of that trajectory and what video game crossovers there are. All right. Space. It's black, right? There's the sun. There's Earth's orbit. There's the Venusian orbit. Then we have Mars and Jupiter. So early on in the development of the trajectory of Clipper, figuring out and establishing the mission architecture being generically the term for how do we get from Earth to somewhere else and do the thing that we're trying to do in that mission. We were planning to go towards Venus and use a Venusian gravity assist to then come back out to Earth and then go out to Jupiter and Europa. But Venus is closer to the sun, so the radiation environment is pretty tough. It's warmer, but we get all of that solar power. However, we traded the power with the complexities of going to Venus and decided we're not going to go to Venus for the gravity assist, but we will go to Mars. So what we do is we launch from Earth, we go to Mars for a gravity assist, we come back to Earth, we use Earth's gravity for a gravity assist, and then we go back out to Jupiter and those Europa flybys. And I just thought I'd mention, not to scale. I mean, don't watch this video later, hold up a ruler and say, hey, Jeff, I Googled your number and found it online, and I wanted to tell you that is not to scale. I know, it's not to scale. Go to the next slide. All right. So first stop, Earth. That's where we're starting, of course, and later returning for the gravity assist. So there's the International Space Station. I don't know if you're familiar with it. A space station in low Earth orbit that includes a variety of modules, both for astronauts to live in and astronauts to perform experiments within, astronauts and cosmonauts. And it's been orbiting Earth for about 20 years. And this is a picture of Earth from the cupola observatory that's on the International Space Station. So when astronauts are planning different operations in space, we do a lot of what's called EVAs, extravehicular activities. These are spacewalks. So when we're planning spacewalks, we start that planning and understanding what the operation is here on Earth, of course. We do that in a couple different ways. We use augmented reality and virtual reality to simulate what the activity is. We also do a fair amount of water testing and bouncing around in. So here's an example of what a spacewalk looks like. So this is around the International Space Station. That's Earth in the upper right-hand corner of the image. That's a pair of astronauts performing an operation. And before they were able to do that in space, here's another astronaut here on Earth. Oh, hi. How's it going? It's not a live feed. So we do a lot of training and development and understanding what the procedures are in pools, large pools, mostly at Johnson Space Center. So even after we do that development work and procedural development on Earth, the astronauts train to do what they're going to do while they're on the space station. So this is a pair of astronauts wearing different kinds of AR and VR goggles, simulating the operations, and what they're holding in their hands are a simulation of the controls that they're going to use when they're out actually on that spacewalk. Flying isn't just about controlling the machine, it's about understanding and controlling yourself. So the impetus here, and of course Amelia Earhart was talking about the Thrustmaster joystick with its force feedback control. The Thrustmaster joystick was originally developed for operations on the space shuttle. The tech used in the force feedback modules were then spun off and commercialized into the same Thrustmaster joystick that we know and love. All right, on to Mars. The gravity assist that we get from Mars, we've been going to Mars for a long time. So Mariner 2 in 1962 was the first spacecraft to successfully visit another planet. That planet was Venus. But in total, the Mariner program was a series of spacecraft exploring the solar system for the first time. The first time that humanity visited, sent pictures back, sent images back, images and pictures. Yeah, those are two different things in the space program. Sent other data back. There were 10 Mariner spacecraft, and we visited those 3 planets for the first time. And all of this was happening in the depths of the Cold War, of course, and this program led the way for a variety of humanities explorations. That's a picture on the right there of the Mariner 1 spacecraft in one of our high bays down at JPL during assembly. Nowadays, we wear hairnets and masks and gloves. I'm not even sure they're wearing gloves. And usually we have jeans on under the pants because the clean rooms get pretty warm in those suits. We call them bunny suits, by the way. Oh, I guess one other note. Nowadays, the space program isn't so white and isn't so male. So we've gotten to a place where, especially, yes, please. I understand the irony of a white male telling you this. We're a much more diverse organization. We look for ways to improve and be inclusive and pull in all diverse ideas from a variety of backgrounds, because there is value in the different lenses that different people can bring to what we're doing. So, yeah, it's funny that I say that before I'm showing Space War. All right. Thank you, yeah. So Space War also came out in 1962. It was developed using the exact same computers that were used for the Mariner mission. So Space War was a dogfighting program. It had gravity simulated in the middle of the screen, so you had this sense of loss of control, and you had to balance what you were doing, balance how you were interacting with gravity, balance how you were fighting the other player. So Space War. And thank you to the one guy that played it. Yeah. Commander Keen. Yeah, all right. It's hit or miss whether any people know about Commander Keen or have any feelings one way or another about him. Fine guy, went to Mars. So Mars, of course, is a critical waypoint for further explorations. In fact, part of the Artemis program and what we're doing in NASA right now is to go to the moon to develop technologies and develop approaches to then go to Mars and send astronauts to Mars for the first time. So it's not just Matt Damon. So he gets all the glory. So in 1990, of course, you knew this, Commander Keen came out for MS-DOS. MS-DOS, anyone? Yeah. MS-DOS was my first interaction with video games on our Pentium 286 in 1993-ish. My uncle gave us his machine because he couldn't figure out how to use it. So so Commander Keen, the idea is to neutralize or avoid threats and collect items on the surface. Not different from what we do with the Perseverance rover and Curiosity. Yeah, sure, it's not alien threats. So the question was, what threats are there? The rocks and terrain, threats of the unknown. I don't mean to start the conspiracy theory that there's definitely aliens on Mars. We're definitely interacting with them, and we find them to be threats now. The threats are hazards in the sense of driving and wearing the different hardware, that kind of thing. So I mentioned the Artemis mission sending astronauts to the moon, Mars, and beyond, and we're collecting samples. We first landed on Mars in the 1970s with the Viking missions. The Viking missions included an orbiter and lander. And here's a nice chart about how we're going to Mars. So the idea, not different from what we've done over time, develop technology here on Earth, use that tech on the moon, and eventually take it to Mars. So I mentioned Mariner in the 60s. The Viking mission was in the 1970s. That mission, the spacecraft in the middle there, half of it stayed in orbit. So the left half stayed in orbit and the right half was part of a lander. There were a pair of those. And that's Perseverance on the right. I have some shots comparing the first images from Viking to some early images from Perseverance. So something we do after we land on a planet is look at our feet, because I don't know about you, but how do you know if you're anywhere if you don't know that your feet are there? And so we take pictures of that. And so for Viking, it was landing pads, and for Perseverance, it was wheels. We also like to get a sense of our surroundings. So Viking there on the left in a pretty rocky field, and on the right, that's Perseverance in the Jezero crater. So the Jezero crater is where we landed on Mars with Perseverance. The Jezero crater is interesting because we believe it used to be a lake a long, long time ago, and a lake that had a river emptying into it. So on Earth, the life-rich areas of Mars, on Earth, the life-rich areas are always where two bodies of water interact. So Mississippi Delta, lots of life in that, where the silt builds up and in that terrain. And so the Jezero crater boasts similar potential. And we always take an image from the top deck. So that's a panorama from the top deck of Viking and Perseverance. So I mentioned we're collecting samples on Mars. A lot of the approaches to software engineering and software controls are the same in what we use in video games as compared to what we use on robotics. A lot of the same kind of algorithms. It's all about inputting some type of data and then doing something with that. The challenge, of course, is that Mars is 100 million miles away. This is a picture into the drill bit holding the very first sample that we collected on Mars. Yeah, thanks. And that's a picture of the same sample, the top of the sample inside the sample tube, the image on the left, and then the top of the seal that sealed that tube shut on the right. So we drilled into the surface. The picture of the coring drill in the middle there is the coring drill preloaded up against the rock. And then we drilled into the rock, we snapped off the sample, we took a picture of it, then we pulled the tube out of the drill bit, and I say we, the rover was doing this, the robot was doing this, none of us were there. And here's a picture of the two holes that we made to collect the two samples that we collected from that rock. And I don't know about you, but, all right. Just to make it run, yeah. All right. So some of our approaches to compression, video compression, and communication for the space program were spun off into the same approaches used in cameras like GoPro. So the picture in the top there is from OSIRIS-REx. OSIRIS-REx was a mission that impacted an asteroid, collected the sample, and then that sample came back to Earth. During that impact, we had a camera strapped onto the spacecraft, and we took a video of that sample collection. This is that video. So we impact the rock, fill a little canister up with the sample, and then bounce back off with the rock. All right, so out to Jupiter. So we've gone past Mars, come back to Earth, shot out to Jupiter. We do Jupiter orbits passing Europa. Way out there, and in most parts of space, we have different thermal environments. We don't want things too hot, we don't want things too cold. So there were major developments in the 90s in microchip tech, in thermal control and thermal management and materials development that supported handling different kinds of temperatures. A couple links there that talk about the spin-offs of these this technology in particular. Along with that, the dawn of the internet and integrating the internet capability with microprocessors is important for spacecraft because we use a lot of those same protocols on our spacecraft. So being able to interconnect those systems is important. The comic on the bottom there is from the Cassini mission. In 2017, we purposefully crash-landed Cassini into Saturn at the end of its mission. Thermal management is a problem for rocket engines as well. So liquid hydrogen is about negative 420 degrees Fahrenheit, or negative 250 Celsius, if you're a metric person. And using convection, conduction, and radiation, we move that cold or that hot one direction or another, depending on what we're trying to do. In the case of the rocket engine, it's turning that negative 420 degrees Fahrenheit hydrogen into a plus 6,000 degree Fahrenheit flame. So that happens within the span of a few feet. So the picture there is the space shuttle main engine, or its call number is RS-25. It's the booster engine for SLS, the Space Launch System, that's going to power the Orion capsule as part of Artemis. So that SSME it's a little taller than me. It's 8-9 feet or so. So in the span of a few feet, we go from negative 420 degrees Fahrenheit to positive 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 6,400 degrees Fahrenheit difference. The same approaches that we use to handle that thermal difference is used in computer cases. Anyone have a gaming rig at home? Yeah. Anyone use glycol, a glycol water mix, or any of you going that? No, not that far. You can use different approaches. I'm not going to get into that here. Okay, so back to the talk, Jeff. Come on. So the picture here is a CPU and a few different approaches. There's some heat pipes. Heat pipes are closed volumes that have a fluid in them, usually some kind of ammonia water mix that carries the heat from one location to another. And we use thermal paste in those that usually is some mixture of silver. The silver is just a good conductor to take the heat from one side to another. And CPUs, it depends on your configuration if you're using that glycol setup or not. To go from 200 degrees Fahrenheit to, case temperatures are 60 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on how tolerant your case is to heat. Don't use a plastic case, if you're trying to overclock your system. A few missions that are going on. So here's Mars Sample Return. That's a picture of one of the retro rockets that we're developing to be used in that mission. So as part of landing, we fire retro rockets to land on the ground, and that's a picture of that test. We're in the early stages of development right now. It takes about 5 years to develop and build some of the larger spacecraft that we work on. And of course, we'll launch after that. But of course, we need to develop it first. The rovers on the right are called CADRE. CADRE stands for Cooperative Autonomous Distributed Robotic Exploration. The CADRE mission is a set of 3 rovers that talk to each other and make decisions about what they're doing together to decide. It's not. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're trying to get. We're not there yet, but Cadre is a step in that direction. So where we're trying to get is to tell a robot, "This is science." Show them a picture of science, whatever science means. Show them a picture of science. This is science, and then that robot go and find that science. So that robot making decisions about how it needs to travel, that robot making decisions about what that science is, if it's important to whatever the scientist that was asking for it, and then that robot to take action to bring that science back to whatever they're trying to do. So Cadre is the early stages of that'll be on the moon. So we're launching sometime next year as part of the CLIPS mission. It's a commercial lunar program that NASA's sponsoring. A variety of different companies are launching different systems. So that's Cadre. Right now, the 3 Cadre rovers are in a freezer in one of my labs. Yeah, the shipping costs, FedEx. SphereX is another spacecraft that's in some of its final stages, set to launch next year, NLT no later than. So SphereX is to be used in conjunction with the James Webb Space Telescope. If you're familiar, cheer if you're familiar with the James Webb Space Telescope, yeah. So James Webb can take incredibly detailed images of planetary bodies and celestial bodies that are very far away. SphereX, one of the functions of SphereX is to map the galaxy, or map, I'm going to go ahead and say this, map the universe to look for exoplanets or other interesting planetary bodies. SphereX stands for, this just reflects the love of acronyms in the space program. SphereX stands for Spectrophotometer for the History of the Universe, Epoch of Reionization, and ICE's Explorer. Yeah, no, we don't even use those words in regular interactions. So we're going to collect data on over 300 million galaxies, over 100 million. There's over 100 million stars in the Milky Way. And working with the James Webb Space Telescope team, we can inform James Webb of interesting celestial bodies to take images of. So what James Webb has been doing a lot of to date is retaking images that the Hubble Space Telescope used to take, or took back in the day. And we're starting to get to a point where we're taking scientist inputs to say, this is what we need to be looking at. I don't know if you heard about the James Webb's images are looking back in time. Because we can see so far away, we're looking back into history because the light hasn't gotten to us yet. It's incredible. So SphereX is going to map the universe, map all the local galaxies to inform James Webb. And then I talked a bit about Europa Clipper. I wanted to tell you where we were. So mission planning, of course, is all complete. Instruments are installed in the spacecraft. The spacecraft is in a high bay. I said this term earlier. High bays are just buildings about as tall as this that are clean rooms and have crane capabilities. High bays, it's a bay that's high. So it's at a high bay in Florida, awaiting launch in October. It's planned for the second week of October. So look it up, watch it. You can. That's going to be streamed. Europa Clipper. It takes about, of course, this is being recorded, and I'm shooting from the hip here, but I'm pretty sure it's about 7 years to get out to Clippers, or out to Europa. So by the time we launch in October 2041, watch the live stream, but don't hold your breath until we launch. It takes a while. Space is big. A game I didn't talk about. Space is big. Remind me of this. Starfield. All right. So yeah. I like Starfield. I love what Starfield's trying to do. I love where they're trying to go. But it's a good example that space is big. It takes a long time to get places. A lot of things look the same. That's space. We're all, I don't know if you're anybody familiar with Neil deGrasse Tyson, but we're all made of the same space stuff. There's a picture of the pillars of creation. That's in the Eagle Nebula. This is a picture from the James Webb Space Telescope. The Eagle Nebula is about 6,500 light years away. So on the Europa Clipper spacecraft, we etched onto a tantalum plate a poem from the U.S. Poet Laureate Ada Limon. This is an excerpt from that poem. We too are made of wonders, of great and ordinary loves, of small invisible worlds, of a need to call out through the dark. And that's really what we're trying to do in the space program. We're trying to explore the universe. We're trying to explore, literally explore places that we haven't been, that we have, in some cases, that we have a loose idea of what we might see when we get there. And in other words, Space, space, want to go to space. Yes, please, space, 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 space to space. Thanks. I have a little time for questions. I think I have that roving mic, so there's a mic over there for questions if you're interested in asking them. Oh, my Instagram's up there. You can hit me up. I actually just started this account, so you will literally see nothing, but I'm going to use this to post things about space and tea and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
hey,
go ahead.
Hello, how are you?
Hi.
Hey, from one spacer to another, thanks for coming to PAX. I'm also a rocket engineer, rocket scientist from Blue Origin, who's directly contributing to the success of the BE-4 engine and NASA's ESCAPADE mission later this October on the maiden voyage of New Glenn.
Groovy.
Thank you. If you didn't know, ESCAPADE stands for Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamic Explorers for Mars. What excites you or supports you directly in your work from the Commercial Crew program?
A self-serving question, but I will answer it. For folks who aren't familiar, the Commercial Crew program is a NASA-funded effort to enable commercial entities to develop crewed spacecraft. The commercial program enables different kinds of risk burn down, different abilities to accept risk or not, and different kinds of risk. Because we might be able to turn around a variety of tests relatively quickly with a commercial crew, but there are some elements of needing to meet different kinds of criteria and different kinds of objectives. But the ability to turn around a lot of complex, hardware-rich development activities is something that we need to continue to pay attention to and continue to implement at NASA at large.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks. Hi.
Hello. With games like Kerbal Space Program that have really, I feel like, driven a lot of interest in space exploration and also tied back to a lot of real-world capacity, a lot of the real-world science, what are some ways to kind of bridge the gap a little bit between game developers and scientists in terms of making games that are a little bit closer to that reality and finding ways to make space exploration a little bit more cool and hype for a mass audience, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, interacting at places like this, so there was an engineer just before you, obviously I'm here. Engineers are interested in video games naturally. So, this might, if anyone is here from PAX and organizing PAX, or I'm staring at the camera, if you're watching this on YouTube in replay, here's a comment that I think is worth listening to. Enabling these interactions to happen at cons like this, at expos like this, if the organizers could enable that, if they could drive some amount of interaction, that would be helpful. But also, I think if we could set up meetups, set up community, I think there's an element that just naturally attending activities like this could already enable. And then outside of that, most folks in the space program are reachable through one way or another. Most of us are on LinkedIn. So and most of us don't receive inquiries like this, and so I think would be open to having conversations about that.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm curious about the mass relays from Mass Effect as a way to travel between different stars. Just wondering if there's any scientific legitimacy to that. And if not, is there another game where travel between stars you've seen done better?
Yeah, it's the same question. It's in this realm of fast travel and what tech might be going into that to enable that. Basis in the reality that we know today, not really. Basis in some futurality, maybe. We know so little about everything, humans, right? We know so little about the world we live in. We know so little about why isn't my hand passing to the table? We know so little about that. And so there's nothing, from my personal perspective, of course, there's nothing that limits us necessarily from getting to a place where we can travel like we travel in Mass Effect. But today we don't have the technology. Yeah, thanks.
Great talk.
Thank you.
And let's see, I'm a game developer.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah,
Oh,
we said
yeah, I know we talked earlier. Yeah,
yeah.
hi.
And I have a talk here tomorrow, 2:30. Small teams, indie games. We have a great panel. But
Come, indie games.
Indie games. Anyone working in indie games?
Indie games, yeah, hey.
All right. Anyway, so what's the most hilarious mistake you've seen a game make about space?
Oh. Hilarious mistake. I don't know. I don't know if I take the observations I make in games to be mistakes or not, rather than poetic license.
A conceit, dramatic conceit.
Yeah. Because it's something that we talked a little bit about this earlier today. Running a space program takes a lot of time and energy, and it would make, at its core, a very boring video game. And so taking some of the elements to certain extremes are needed to make for a playable game. And so I don't know that there's any mistake in particular, but I suppose, let's talk about Lovers of a Dangerous Space-Time. I don't think the bunnies are going to be trapped on such a low-mass object for such a long time. And I don't think they need me and a wacky crew, and if I'm playing by myself, practically unusable AI to save them. So maybe it's not funny, but it's certainly frustrating.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the talk, and thank you for all the examples of cross-pollination between the games industry and the space technology industry. My question for you is, what are some opportunities you see for game studios to contribute to future space exploration efforts, if any?
Sure. This is a big topic in general, but the latest developments in AI and large language models and the approaches to procedural generation in video games, I think there's some solid overlap in enabling robotics to make their own decisions, and to get to that place where you're showing them what science is, and then they're going and doing the thing. So probably most directly in that area, algorithm development and how to use algorithms in robotics.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, I have a brief question regarding your presentation earlier, sir.
Sure.
And I'm just going to turn over here so I can actually look and talk to you properly.
All good.
Obviously, earlier on the slides, whenever you specify the flight path, it's always orbit/flyby. Is the intention for the craft to not be like permanently stationed over Europa? Is it going off beyond the system like past probes, or?
It's going to hang out at Jupiter.
Okay.
And while Europa is orbiting Jupiter, the spacecraft will hang out with Europa.
Okay, so it is staying in Jupiter's neighborhood.
Yeah, it's not actually orbiting Europa, but it'll be in the area.
Okay, so it's not just not just going off to try and catch up to Voyager or whatever.
Correct.
Got it.
Nah, we're not doing that. Thank you.
Hi.
Hey.
A pattern that we've seen in games, in space games over the last decade plus emerging, really started with Kerbal Space Program, is an increasing number of space games that really emphasize realistic space mechanics, travel, that sort of stuff. You know, a lot of it was like Sims. We're also starting to see some increased like space combat-oriented stuff, Children of Dead Earth, Terra Invicta, that kind of stuff. I was interested in your thoughts on how sort of the interaction between space exploration and the video game industry sort of shaped this, and how this new pattern is also sort of affecting that interaction.
Yeah, no, great question. So I think that just as I'm an example of someone who likes coming to PAX and has been reading Penny Arcade for a very long time, there is a lot of overlap in the nerddom. And so there's a lot of overlap already in the two cultures and the two sets of people. So I think some of this, Jeff theory, some of that natural overlap drives that desire to have some level of realism into a game and trying to push for that game. Now, I don't know if there's always a pendulum. You don't want to swing too far, because you get into that state of, I'm spending 7 years flying to Europa, real time. That is not a lot of fun. But there's some elements where the user base, because we're already interacting at the nerd level in these spaces, that we desire some amount of, I want to launch a rocket like we're launching rockets with NASA. I want to fly this spacecraft like we would fly this spacecraft in the solar system. Yeah, thanks.
Hello. Could you
Hi.
talk a little bit more about how the data from Perseverance is going to help inform future missions on Artemis and other programs going to Mars? And also, are you going to play Space Marine 2?
Thank you. So the data, some of the data around how we're collecting samples and what the geology is will inform topics like where we might want to go in the future, or where we might want to collect future data for. And then the experiment that I mentioned, Moxie, is directly informing how we can have humans survive on Mars. So there's aspects like that that are just directly linked to how we're doing that. Thanks. Hi.
This ends up kind of being a follow-on to
Oh,
one of those
sorry.
other ones.
Space Marines 2. Yeah, I'll play Space Marines 2. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Ends up kind of being a follow-up to an earlier question. Excluding sim-type games, what game do you think does local space travel the best and the worst? Or fiction?
Sure. Most games do local space travel, thinking from a realistic standpoint, not from a level of fun standpoint. Most space games do local space travel poorly. We don't just point our ship in a place and go there. We do things, I was talking about this in my pre-talk earlier this morning, like Hohmann transfers. So these ideas of, and if you play Kerbal Space Program, you might know what this is, turning on your propulsion system on one side of a planet to impact how we're flying on the other side of the planet. We don't just point ourselves that direction and go there, because we can't, because we have all these gravitational forces that we're interacting with, and it's more than just us in space. Now, if we got to a place where there were zero interactions, and there aren't many of those in the solar system, then maybe they're closer to that. But yeah, most games do local space travel pretty poorly. So then okay, Jeff, what does it well? Then it goes back to those games that are simulating space environments, because right now that's how we fly. And so only those games that are simulating kind of how we launch rockets are like the Kerbal Space Programs, that are doing space travel well in a kind of closest to how we actually do it. Yeah, thanks.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Earlier you talked a bit about the complexities of choosing what is actually going to move a spacecraft, like whether using solar compared to the distance of the sun or using nuclear reaction. What theories do you see coming into fruition in the next 20 to 30 years? Some examples like nuclear fusion or the research into the stability and commercialization of man-made elements in terms of like thrust compulsion, heat management, cold management, et cetera.
Yeah, great question. I think additive manufacturing is enabling a lot of interesting design. So additive manufacturing, 3D printing. We do a fair amount of 3D printing at the prototype and development level. And Europa Clipper, we're actually flying a 3D printed bracket or two to proof of concept to get comfortable with the idea of flying something that's been additively manufactured. The parts that we are additively manufacturing in the space program are usually metal, so it's using some amounts of lasers and high heats to do that. So developments in the additive manufacturing area, I think, can drive the potential for unique designs, because you can imagine if I don't have to fit a mill, an end mill, if I don't have to fit a tool in there to cut the shape into the part, and I can instead grow it from nothing, then you can have a lot of different approaches to shapes.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I saw that
Hello.
you mentioned Outer Worlds on your list of games, but I was wondering if
Yeah.
you played Outer Wilds, which I think is one of the greatest games perhaps ever, but especially that involves space.
Yeah, but have you ever minimized the intelligence in Outer Worlds and then sent your spaceship into the sun? But I completely agree. Outer Wilds is, yes, I have played Outer Wilds. I don't want to spoil the game for people, so that's actually why I don't talk about it. But it's, yeah, I completely agree. Outer Wilds is a phenomenal game.
Great, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. No, thank you. That's public service. That was a public service right there. Go play Outer Wilds.
Sorry if I missed it because I came in a little
Oh,
late.
good.
But
I took a physics course that I had, and if you showed up late to that physics course, the professor made us sing "I'm a Little Teapot" in front of the class. I'm not going to make you do that, but you'll get some applause if you do. On to the question, Jeff. Sorry, go ahead.
I know you mentioned the cadre program. I was curious if they're going to do any like helicopters like Ingenuity in that program as well.
Not as part of cadre. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere, so the helicopters wouldn't be able to fly if it was a typical kind of helicopter. But there's some potential for future Martian helicopters. So there's some potential for future missions. There's a mission in early development that might send a drone or a helicopter or small, I guess drone, helicopter, same, to Titan. So there's some potential for future helicopters. Yeah, for sure.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So when do you see it being in the program? When do you see us having boots on Mars?
Boots on Mars. So I'm gonna give you an answer, but the caveat being this has been the answer since 1967. We're about 20 years away.
Okay.
Okay, if there's nothing else, thank you very much for coming.
I was about to go talk to him.